Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamisha Wise, and I'm one of the school counselors of Los Altos High School, and I have the pleasure of introducing the college admissions timeline. What I am going to do is share my screen. If there is someone with translation, we have Maria Herney to be able to translate in Spanish. So I'm going to do this really quickly.
Hola, buenas noches. Si necesitan ayuda en español con la interpretación, va a haber un icono que pueden oprimir. La señora Wise está programando todo para que ustedes puedan escuchar el webinar en español. Gracias por su paciencia y bienvenidos.
Laura, it's not recording. I got it. So this will also be recorded. So we are just going to get started, and I am going to introduce Chudy 2. Take it away, Chudy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us about navigating the college admissions test landscape. So what I'm going to do,
Las evaluaciones para la universidad.
share my screen.
Voy a compartir mi pantalla con ustedes.
Okay, okay. Hold on one moment.
Por favor.
Sure. Okay. Let's see now. Why is the sharing paused? One moment. Sorry for the
Disculpen las inconveniencias.
Un momentico, por favor. Oh, wait. Okay, hold on. I think we now have it. Yes,
Lo tenemos.
great. Oops. Let's go back to, yes. Excellent. Good evening, everyone.
Muy
So,
buenas noches a todos.
okay, now let me just make sure I am working it on my end. So, I am with Compass Education Group, and in case you are not familiar with our organization, we have for the past 25 years been providing the highest quality one-on-one and group test preparation and also academic tutoring.
Sí, también tutoría académica.
We serve thousands of students annually, tutoring students anywhere in the world, online or in person in the Los Angeles, San Francisco, and most major cities across the country.
Y varias ciudades a través del país.
By the way, I just want to ask both Tamisha and Maria, is everyone supposed to be hearing both the English and the Spanish? I wasn't sure if that's because if that's the case, I will make sure to pause so that the interpretation can occur.
No, you're not.
Okay, so for whatever reason, I am hearing your Spanish. Does that make sense? And I'm not sure why that is happening.
Sorry about that. It's going to work now. I just did the interpretation.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Thanks, Tamisha. Okay, excellent. So before we start on all of this, I'm going to share with you a saying that is very common in the testing industry, which is this: testing is often less important than students fear and more important than colleges will admit. So, how are you supposed to look at college testing? So, I'm here. Think of me as your college admissions test Goldilocks. I'm going to right size your expectations, not too important, not too little importance, just right, about the significance of the SAT and the ACT. So, all I cover today is in this guide that you can download with this QR code, or if you wish, you can call our office, email our office for a hard copy if you're, old school like me and you like to dog ear and highlight things. So my presentation is going to be an hour, but literally what is it's like an encyclopedia. I really suggest that you download it because whatever questions you may have during and or after the presentation will be answered here. By the way, we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So save your questions till then. If you want, you can also just pop them in the Q&A box. So here's a brief overview, not just of what I'm going to talk about tonight, but also about all of the decisions you'll be making as you journey make your journey along the college admissions testing timeline. So admission tests and grade inflation and why admissions tests still are around. We'll discuss that. Then we'll we'll talk about SAT or the ACT. Then creating a testing timeline and how to plan for it, committing to preparation and what that can look like. I'll give you some examples. And finally, we'll talk about how do you use your test scores. Now that will really be hinging more on the test optional schools, because obviously test required, you have no choice. You have to submit test scores, and test free, you don't have to submit test scores at all. By the way, just want to be clear, when I'm talking about test scores, I am only talking about the SAT and the ACT. So later on, we'll be talking about test free, test optional, and test required. Test free schools, it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's really not all test free. It's just SAT and ACT free. These test free schools many times look at AP tests and place much more emphasis on them because they don't have the SAT or the ACT to lean upon. So let's take a look at admissions tests and grade inflation. So here what you see in this graph is that the average high school GPA is on the rise. If you take a look at way back in the late 1960s, 1970, taking that year, some of us, parents, counselors, guardians, and myself included, were alive at that point. 25% of students had an A average. Now, flash forward many decades, you'll see, okay, during the pandemic, there was an absence of data because a lot of unnecessary or naturally confusion. But in 2022, a good 80% of high school students had an average GPA of an A minus, A, or A plus. So tests provide a common yardstick by which to judge a student's profile. That's why colleges still look at tests. Now you compare that graph with this graph, which is really flatlined. You'll see the average ACT score, and it says ACT means or average scores are stable. Here it's 1990 to 2022. The average score has remained constant. So when you look at them side by side, you really see the drastic, stark contrast. So the ACT and the SAT, similarly, are engineered to provide a bell curve in the test score results. So this reflects a somewhat bitter pill to swallow, which is that not all students are destined to get a perfect score. I mean, there's what we call a soft ceiling. In other words, endless effort does not yield endless results. So here you have the ACT distribution of scores, and it is a bell curve.
Excuse me,
So
Judy.
yes,
I want to let you know that your slides aren't advancing, and so the attendees aren't able to see the slides that you're actually presenting. There we go.
oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, I don't know why that's happening. I apologize. Okay. Do you know what I'm going to do? There's a workaround. Thank you for telling me that.
I just wanted you aware.
Yeah, no. I'm glad. So, Tamisha, let me just make sure. I don't know why they hadn't been advancing. Oops. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me go back to one moment. Let me just, yeah, I don't know why it had been. Please stand by, everyone. Okay, so here, for whatever reason, it was not, okay. In the dry run, it was working perfectly. So you know how it is. Sometimes, ugh. Okay, so let's try this. Okay. Tamisha, can you tell me, did the slides advance?
I don't even see him doing anything as of now. I think we completely have nothing's on at the moment.
Got it. Okay. Hold on. One moment. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look. Let's
I,
see.
I do see the slides now.
And do you see the slide that says, but wait, what's a good score?
No, I see the best predictor of academic success. There we go.
I don't know why this is happening. Okay, I'm going to manually. Okay, got it. Thank you, Tamisha. Um, Let me
Thank
know if they, oh, sorry about that. Not sure why this is happening. Okay, so people often ask us, but wait, what's a good score? Like it says on the screen. And sorry about the little snafu there. So what I'm going to do now is show you one of the Compass blogs, and it talks about the what's called the middle 50th percentiles of schools in terms of the scores of the students that they admitted. So what you see here, it's compassprep.com/college profiles. And what you can do is search for any school that you're interested in, and it will spit out the statistics. So let's just try, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm just going to say University of Alabama, just as an example. Okay. Oops. Why is this not Alabama? Perfect. Okay. So what you see here, University of Alabama, tests are required. So Compass every year keeps up to date with over 400 top colleges and universities in the United States. And you'll see the school, the testing policy here, U of A test is required, policy details, the number of applicants, their acceptance rate, and then the middle 50th percentile. And what is that? So U of A, they admitted um, the next class of students. And what they found is that the middle 50th percentile of the students from like, the lowest score to the high score, the middle 50th percentile, that's what they're showing here. So what this means is the middle 50th percentile of SAT scores were 1110 to 1360. And what that means is while 25% of admitted students did score higher than 1360, it also is also true that 25% of admitted students to U of A got less than 1110. So what this provides, and then the ACT, you see that it's 22 to 30, and the same rules apply. What this is like a target that I want you to like kind of shoot for with your arrow of your application. And that it's always good to have a goal. It helps you focus your efforts. And that's what this is for. Now, this doesn't mean that, oh, if you get a score in between these numbers that you'll automatically get in. No, it doesn't. But what it means is that you will have a solid chance. You will have a solid application with which to submit to University of Alabama in this case. So please feel free to go to this blog and uh, search to your heart's delight with whichever schools that you are interested in. So I'm now going to go back to our presentation, and I just want to make sure that I don't lose you again. Let's go back to full screen. Okay, so how testing relates to merit aid. That also can help you decide what is a good score. And the reason I say this is because a lot of schools, and interestingly enough, many southern states tend to offer more scholarships and aid that are based on merit. And what that means is test scores and GPA. So your investment of time, money, and energy into prepping for college admissions tests not only helps with admissions, but helps you uh, with financially, helps you possibly gain scholarship and financial aid. So what you see here is that the PSAT or SAT and ACT scholarships, like the Hope Scholarship in Georgia. I mentioned University of Alabama, Auburn University, University of Florida. So some of these schools and scholarships offer tens of thousands of dollars, some a full ride, possibly renewable for all 4 years. So you want to do your research. There's scholarships called the Chancellor Scholarships. They're also merit-based and offered at many colleges. So if you think about it, test preparation, the return on investment can potentially be very positive. So our next step or next decision, if you will, is making the best choice, the SAT or the ACT. So I love to share this very funny cartoon. You have two sets of parents talking to one another, and one mom says to the other couple, "We were originally thinking SAT, but then Noah's admissions advisor told us left-handed students born on Tuesdays do better on the ACT." I do this to bring some lightness and levity to the situation because everyone hears rumors, anecdotes, stories, and they're really not statistically based. So take things that you hear with a grain of salt. Like, for example, oh, such and such test is better for athletes. Such and such test is better for this gender or whatever. It doesn't hold any water. What we want you to do is what we like to say, take a test drive. You know how you take a test drive of cars and try to say like, oh, how do you like the handling? How comfortable are you? You're going to do the same thing with the SAT and the ACT. So let's take a look at first and foremost the SAT. And when I say the SAT, I mean both the SAT and the ACT. So what you have is the key features of this test. It's scored on a 1,600 point scale, 1520 for the PSAT, because that is easier. It is 2 hours and 14 minutes, and it is what's called stage adaptive rather than static, and I'll explain what that means. And there is an even split, as you can see, between the verbal and the math content. There is a brief 10-minute break, and this, what you'll see is an initial module in the verbal section and in the math section. And then, depending on how you do in that first module, you will be routed to either 2A or 2B in both the verbal and the math. So let's get into a little bit more of the details on how what's called adaptive testing, how that works. So what you do is you take module 1. All students will get the same level, this module 1, in either the verbal or the math. So if a student gets less than 2/3 of the questions right, they will be routed to the easier path, and it'll look something like this. If they get more than 2/3 right, they will be routed to the harder path, and it'll look something like this. If you compare both paths, what you'll see is that the moderate level questions, which is represented by the medium colored rectangles, those are the same amount. Whereas the easier path will have more easy level questions, which are the light rectangles, and then the dark rectangles, which represents the more difficult questions. There are more of those difficult questions in path B. So, oops, hold on, let me just make sure. Yes, okay. So don't worry about which path A or path B, that you are routed to. You're not going to be able to tell as you are taking the test. The spectrum of possible scores in the easier and harder paths actually overlaps. So where you are routed to, A or B, easy or difficult, is not what's called fatalistic. You're not doomed one way or another. I like to look at, if you look at the lowest and the highest possible scores of the easy module and the lowest and the highest possible scores of the difficult module, they actually overlap. In other words, you can get high or low scores with either path. Now, I just wanted to quick include this National Merit Scholarship Program funnel, if you will, about the program, because I know that juniors would be interested in this scheduling. And if you happen to be a sophomore, you would just, alter, if you're in a class of 28, you would be looking at obviously taking the PSAT in October of 2026. And you'll see that the deadlines for each, as they whittle down, like commended students, semifinalists, finalists, down to scholar, excuse me, this is how the scheduling progresses. So in case you're interested in the National Merit Scholarship Program, you can talk to your counselor for greater detail. just very briefly, it is a highly competitive situation, and how the scores for the National Merit Scholarship are computed is they will count the verbal score twice and the math score once. That's it in a nutshell. I can go further into the weeds, but I'd like to um, move on to the other material. Now, from the SAT, let's now take a look at the ACT. So what you have here is instead of 1600, you are now getting a score out of 36. So it's a little bit different. And what you'll see is, now remember, we're kind of comparing apples to oranges, if you will. The SAT was half verbal and half math. This is a little bit different. It goes English and then math and then reading. So if you notice, there's verbal, math, verbal, and then an optional science section. There is also an optional essay, but do not worry about that optional. There's only about a handful of colleges look at that anymore. Two of them are Martin Luther College and West Point. So don't waste your time or energy. Don't stress out at all about this, because even if you take it, most schools won't even look at it. Now, we do suggest that you take the optional science section, and I will tell you why in a subsequent slide. But do know that these first three, those are what are required if you are taking the ACT, and that is only 2 hours and 5 minutes. The SAT was 2 hours and 14 minutes. Now, if you do take the optional science section, it will be 2 hours and 45 minutes. So if you're taking the ACT, you ignore the optional essay, take the optional science, and do remember that there are throughout the test of the ACT and the SAT what's called unscored field test items. And what that means is those questions, those are ones that the ACT or the College Board, in the case of the SAT, will throw at a student, but it won't go towards the score. The thing is, a student does not know if a question is a field test item. So that's all students have to just keep on doing their best throughout. But just know that those are going to be sprinkled throughout the test. So let's take a closer look at what ACT reading passages look like. So what you see here is an example of a passage. This is from a short story, Janice, by Ann Beadle, 1985, from New Yorker magazine. And it's 700 to 800 words per passage. You see multiple paragraphs, detailed descriptions, more terminology than you would a shorter SAT passage, and background information. Along with this, you will also get 9 questions per passage. And I have some students that will be like, great, you only have 4 passages. Do this, and you have only 3 passages to go. You can also go, oh my gosh, that was only 1 passage, and I have 3 more passages to go. And I say it both ways because how a student approaches the reading passages on either the SAT or ACT, that can very well determine which test they would prefer to take. So Amy Poehler, also known, Leslie on Parks and Recs, it's like everything hurts and I'm dying. Some students really don't like long passages. And then let's look at the SAT. Some students love these short passages. So this is from John F. Kennedy during the September 1960 presidential debate. And it is literally only 1 paragraph. Some people think of it like the length of a tweet on what is now X or a TikTok post. These kinds of SAT passages are anywhere from 25 to 150 words. So some students like short passages, but you have to be careful. Like Steve Grelly is thinking that's too easy. But wait, I even have a student who told me this, tutoring him for the SAT, and he wasn't doing all that well. And he told me, he's like, wait, Judy, I think I finally figured it out. I can't skim on the SAT. I was exactly. And the reason being is because since there's so fewer words with which to comprehend what a passage is about, like every word is important. So words that sometimes challenge my students, like disingenuous versus ingenuous versus ingenious, they get confused. Like, wait a minute, what does that mean again? Oh, I forgot. And the comprehension of a passage could hinge upon just that one word. So students have to be very careful. Again, you want to test or take a test drive of both tests to see which kind of reading passage a student does better at. Now, that's the reading portion. If we compare the English portions, or in the SAT, it's called the writing, you're basically the standard English conventions are tested very similarly. So you'd study in the same way. I like to tell my students that, unfortunately, sometimes we encounter people like writers like Charles Dickens, who, hey, they get the laxity of being able to use comma splice after comma splice. But unfortunately, we humans, we lesser mortals who aren't Charles Dickens, have to adhere to standard English conventions. So now let's take a closer look at the SAT and ACT math. Here's what's interesting. What you'll see is, okay, the SAT, those are the blue columns, the ACT are the red columns, and the ACT is known as being a broader test, meaning more different types of math subjects. So hence broader. Whereas SAT is known as a deeper test, meaning that it dives more deeply into algebra and algebra 2. So literally a good 70% of the SAT is algebra and algebra 2. So just as an example, here's an example ACT math question, good old geometry, right? And then a SAT math section, very algebra based, very lots of variables. Sometimes people get cross-eyed. So that's what the SAT has, just as examples. Now, I want to show this example of a science kind of passage and the types of questions you'll see. What I like to tell my students is that science is really like a reading section, another reading section, but it happens to have a lot of diagrams, maybe charts, maybe some experimental data, and it's on a science topic. So some students are a little bit intimidated. They think, oh my gosh, I absolutely hate science. I shouldn't take the ACT. No, no, no. If you happen to like reading, you'll actually do well at science once you practice taking a look at these kinds of diagrams. So people still ask, really, what should I do about the science? I mean, maybe I can take the ACT without the science section. Of course you can do that. However, we also don't believe in wasting time or panicking when it comes time to college applications. So here we have just a sampling of schools, their general testing policy, and then their stance on science. Here's what's been happening. Not all schools have released their philosophies or their policies on the science section, and some haven't even decided because they're not so sure that this new enhanced ACT is new. It used to be a slightly different format, and the science used to be required. So now that it's optional, like Pomona College, what they're saying is it's test optional. Should you decide to take the ACT, you are required to take the science section. Now, Boston University, also the same. Here you have these three schools. Yes, test optional. Should you decide to take the ACT, they just recommend taking the science. What does that mean to you? I mean, hey, they recommend it. You might as well. Here, it's optional. So this is something you need to kind of keep your ear to the ground, whatever colleges you're interested in. And if you're interested in taking the ACT, what you want to do is keep abreast of the new policies by, checking out our blog post. Now, people will ask, what if a student scores low on the science section? Can they hide it? So what I have here on this slide is just zoomed in on the Common App. This question, would you like to report an ACT science score? And you get to decide either one. They're not asking you, did you take the ACT science? And therefore, like, you have to say, oh, yes, I took it, but I don't want to report my score because I was really disappointed. You don't have to do that. It's just saying, hey, do you want to report something? So it really does provide a strong cover with which you can hide low science scores if you wish. So, as I said, you want to take a test drive. We've looked at both tests. So how are you going to compare both scores? You're going to use this concordance chart. Um, what's on the screen, and actually, if you check compassprep.com, on there, we actually have other tools by which you can toggle and look at equivalent scores very quickly. A bunch of toys that you can play with. So what you're going to do is, hold on, let me make sure that, yes. So for example, this student, they take a practice ACT. Notice this is not an official test. This is a practice test before you even decide to start prepping for an official test. So you want to take these practice tests, the test drive, right? The ACT, this student gets a 22. On their PSAT or a practice SAT, they get a 1200. What you're going to look for is where those two scores intersect. And here, the point of intersection is right in the blue. So what that means is this student fares better with the SAT. That is what they should really concentrate on, and not waste their time with the ACT. By the way, I have had some students who have said to me, Judy, I'm just going to take both tests to hedge my bets, and I'll prepare for both. That is, here's my metaphor for that. That is like trying to build two homes at the same time with the same amount of resources, time, money, and energy. It doesn't make sense to build two homes. You want to concentrate and focus all of your efforts on one so that one home can be awesome, right? You don't want to do, a mediocre job on both. So let's take a look. Here's a little pop quiz. I'd like you all to put on your quiz hats. The SAT or the ACT? Here we have Lisa and Joel. You probably, some of us older folk recognize these actors. Based on what these two individuals scored on both of their tests, practice tests, which exam would you recommend? So you see Lisa's scores and then you see Joel's scores. So what I'm going to do, just for ease, I'm going to put their scores next to the concordance chart. So let's take a look at Lisa. Baseline score, her practice SAT, 1350. That's around there, okay? That line. And then she got a 32 ACT. So if you look, the 1350, that point of intersection is right about there. She should really focus on the ACT. Now, let's take a look at Tom Cruise, I mean Joel, and a baseline score of 1240. It's just underneath that. And then the 26, take a look at that. That's the 26, right? It's in that judgment call zone. So what do? Well, you can look at the schedules, like which weekends work better for you, your schedule. By the way, it's very important that you look at a student's schedule. When are their travel plans, football games, plays, track meets, all of the things that possibly fill up a student schedule, especially junior year. Woo, very, very busy. So I like to share that I once had a student, bless his heart, who scheduled his first official ACT test sitting the morning after his prom. Even though he was a very bright student, let me tell you, he had, I think, 2-3 hours of sleep and did terribly on the test and had to take it again. So learn from him. Do not do that. So another way that you can decide which test to take, should there be a tie between the practice tests, is look at your score reports. Now, what you want to do is get detailed score reports from, an excellent testing source like Compass, for example. So I want to show you an example of our SAT score reports. What you have here, let me make sure that you can see this. Yes, excellent. Okay, so what you have here is Sammy student, and they got a 1380 on their PSAT, which is equivalent roughly to a 27 on the ACT. And this whole report provides very valuable detailed information on the verbal and the math, percentage correct. Actually, you can look at trends in terms of where does a student lose focus or energy, and also what kinds of questions are perhaps stumping them, or are they spending too much time on? And you get to see this because our reports show the tutor, the parent, guardian, counselor, and the student how much time is spent on each question. And for example, this particular question, Sammy's student spent over 6 minutes on one question. You should never do that. That's way too much time. And you'll see this happened to be a point of view type of question in the text structure and purpose skill. And that way, I, as a tutor, know, okay, this is what we need to drill more. Let's look at possibly some of the maybe bad habits or things that didn't fully sink in. So we'll know, okay, let's review that and hone in on that. Another, I'm going to show you now as an example, our ACT score report, which I also love, is finding out how a student scores to in comparison to similar scores in their, shall we say, ability pool. And what this tells you is, for example, this question here, that's question 10, 90% of similar scorers got this question right. So what that tells me is that this is probably a careless mistake. So I can, chalk that up to, okay, what kinds of careless mistakes does my student make? We'll make sure to review that. But that's not, let's say, a fundamental or foundational type of misstep. Whereas something like this, question number 40, conventions of standard English. I know this is a grammar situation, and only 31% of similar scores got this question right. Okay, no problem. So this wasn't careless. This is actually definitively something that the student does not comprehend, and we really need to review versus, again, these types of questions are just careless mistakes. So these, what you want is to have as detailed a score report as possible. Now, you have the opportunity to get a detailed score report because we have partnered with the MVLA's community and Compass. We're very, very happy to waive our fees for practice tests, and the fee will be waived for a digital test taken within 60 days of this presentation. So feel free to scan this QR code so you or your student can take a free practice test. And then, you'll be provided with the very detailed score report that I mentioned, and also a complimentary, no obligation consultation. You can ask any question you want about not just testing actually, but just the whole college admissions process if you'd like. So hold on one moment. Yes, that is not what I had meant to go. Okay, let's go back to the presentation and I will go perfect. Beautiful. Oops, why did it do that? Wow, sorry about that. Folks, let me get out of this and okay, this should now be good. Let me go here. Perfect. Just trying to, beautiful. Now it should advance. Don't know why this is doing that. Let me advance the slide in a different fashion. Let's try it like so. Wow, not sure why this is doing this. Okay, wait one moment. Frustrating. Okay, I think this is good. Next step is creating a testing timeline and plan. So this here is what a traditional timeline looks like. And I would say a good 2/3 of students do some variation of this. And what you'll see is that students usually want to complete their testing by October of their senior year. So that means that the testing will stop at this point. And the reason being is this is just a sampling of early action dates and also early decision deadline dates. So you'll see this is exactly why you want to end at, the October testing date. So if you are aiming for this kind of traditional timeline, the first sitting for an official test will be sometime in the spring of junior year, February, March, April, May, June. And whatever testing date that you want to aim for, that is your goal, roughly 3 to 4 months beforehand is a healthy amount of time with which to prepare for the test. So it's always important to remember as you're preparing for junior year that May and June time period, if you happen to be taking AP courses or plan to take AP tests, a lot time for that. Make sure that you don't cram all of your tests at once. And so the second and final sitting for either the ACT or SAT, whichever one you decide, will be in either September or October of the senior year. So here you have the 2026 ACT and SAT test dates. This can help you, plan a little bit, plan ahead. And by the way, many of the slides that I've been showing you, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that in the Compass Guide, the one that you can either get the digital or hard copy version of, it'll show you where you can find this information and more detailed information, and the page number. So next decision is you're going to want to commit to some sort of preparation, right? I like to say you wouldn't compete in the Super Bowl without ever having stretched a muscle, practiced some sort of football play. You need you need to have prepared somehow. So what would that look like? Hold on, I want to get out of this. Okay. What would that look like? So we came up with what looks like, or what we like to call the golden ratio. Approximately one lesson per week. That could be one-on-one, group classes, or even just self-prep. And what self-prep would be, one lesson per week might be one chapter in the College Board official SAT study guide or the ACT book that you can get, making sure that you progress through all of the material. So one lesson slash chapter slash topic area per week, one practice test per month, and then homework completed throughout, roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours of homework per week. And as you can see here, we suggest 3 months, sometimes 4. So you can choose which route you'd like to take. Private tutoring, pros are that it's highly individualized. You get to say when, where, how fast, all of that, and it's very flexible. And wow, the potential for increasing and improving is great. But of course, it can be expensive. So Compass, as well as many other companies, provide this one-on-one type of situation. If you wish, you can scan this QR code for more information. Now, group classes is, oh, hold on, I didn't realize, in-person and online tutoring. One-on-one can occur both in person or online. And you notice here, the San Francisco Bay Area, we do have in-person possibilities. And we have an online test center that you'll be able to utilize, and also detailed notes with how a student is doing. Group classes, I'm happy to present to you because you are watching or present here for tonight's webinar. You get 10% off our classes with this code, presentation 10. And make sure to mention this if you're talking or typing it in to get your discount. And here's a QR code that you can scan if you'd like more information. You will get the exact same materials, the exact same types of practice tests as you would with the one-on-one. It's just in a group situation, which is also either in person or online. Very cost effective. It's great because you can cooperate and collaborate with other students and maybe even motivate one another. And it can be a wonderful introduction slash primer for privates. That's also happened to me before, where I have taught a group class, and then one or two of my students might say, hey, I just like 1 or 2 private sessions. That's it, to, kind of grease the wheel in some areas. So that's also a possibility. The only thing is that instruction is less individualized. I know that when I have taught classes, I'll have the students that need a lot of extra attention, but I'm not allowed, I'm not able to give it to them because, you have to talk to 12, 15 students. And then I have the students that are just acing everything and they want to be more challenged, but I have to go the pace of, kind of the average student. So that's really the only con with group classes. Now, what group classes look like? Class materials are mailed directly to you. class time is evenly split between math/math science and English/reading. And there will be diagnostic tests throughout. This is an example of some of the group classes that Compass offers. Now, many other companies do as well, so I encourage you to look there if you'd like to compare. ACT, SAT, we have boot camps that are a little bit more accelerated for those who have less time to prepare. And then we also have AP courses and checkpoints and review if you wish. And then we also have, is it here? We have one called here it is, the Essentials, which this doesn't really focus so much on the testing per se, but just providing a foundation of the skills and strategies that a student would need to know before taking a test. I have some students, for example, who didn't get that great of a grammar education in their schools because maybe they transferred or they traveled or they missed school, what have you. And so they just need some of those basics. They want to strengthen their foundation. They will take something like the Essentials class. Finally, self-prep, which is a totally valid and least expensive route to take in terms of preparing for a college admissions test. What's great is it's self-paced, flexible. You just need to make sure that you are organized and that you are consistent with your work. Of course, you don't, really have any oversight or support necessarily. What I encourage everyone to do, not just if you're interested in preparing on your own. And by the way, self-prep might look like buying a book from Amazon or getting it from the library if students still do that. Oh my gosh, that's so old school. But yes, buying something from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, what have you, borrowing it from a neighbor, whatever works for you. Now here, if you scan this QR code, this is a chance to take a free Compass class. So definitely take it. You'll see you might just get enough to prepare for the test. And it's an example of how our classes work, and you can see if it's a good fit for you. So again, here's that golden ratio. So what do you want to concentrate on in your test prep? I'm going to have to go through this quickly. How test prep works, strategies, rules of grammar, etc. Knowledge, rules of grammar, formulas, etc. Strategies is more on the type of test, the type of question, and how you can use that to the best in your favor, shall we say. Time management and emotional control. Like if you are tired, if you are not feeling focused, how do you go back and hone in and make sure, rehone your attention on the task at hand? So here's an example really quickly on how test prep works. You want to know the structure of the test. The ACT English questions 1 through 50. These are just different test form codes. And the green rectangles, easy questions, yellow, moderate, red are difficult. So let's say you happen to get test form code K and take a look at that streak of red there, or that streak of red/orange, which is kind of like moderately difficult. So a student will know that because the order of difficulty on the ACT English section is very haphazard, there's no rhyme or reason, there's no pattern. They know that right around the corner of any difficult period or difficult section will be some low-hanging fruit. It's like the easy points are right around the corner. So a student knows not to get discouraged and knows to keep focused and consistent on the task at hand. Because who knows, look, the very last question in test form code K is an easy question. So keep on plugging forward. Don't get discouraged. Now, ACT math is very different. Questions, 45 questions. It obviously goes from easy, moderate to difficult. So how do you utilize this to your advantage? Well, let's say you're not very good at math. What you would do is really just concentrate on the first 30 to 40 questions in the time given, because that will be more of your wheelhouse. That will play to your strengths. And then in the last minute, go ahead and just answer the same letter for this final section, B or C or A or D, whatever is your favorite letter, and you will have a better chance of getting those than if you had tried to tackle these, because the more difficult questions really do take more time. That's how they're that totally just makes sense logically. Now let's say you're really good at math. What you would do is in your prep, what you would make sure is, let's say the first 15, 20 questions, you want to get very quick. You don't want to just spend 1 minute per question. That is the worst possible strategy. What you want to do is learn to do the easier questions more quickly through homework and quizzes and practice tests, if you will. So you can bank time at the end for the questions that are more challenging and naturally take more time. So I am going to skip through this really quick because I'm looking at time. I want to leave you time for questions. This is the SAT. The heat map is also the same, easy, moderate, difficult questions. The white questions, those are examples of field test questions. Those are not scored. You notice this is also, shall we say, a sawtooth pattern in terms of difficulty. Math also from easy to difficult. So deciding how to use test scores. Again, we want to look at those test optional schools. So what you'll do is you'll take your test scores and then you will compare them with what you see for the information for the colleges that you are interested in. And you'll look at the middle 50th percentiles of those colleges on your list. And you will look at their testing policy. So here, just to give you an overview, I want to give you the overview of the testing policy landscape. This is what it used to be back in pre-pandemic, spring of 2020 and before that. Notice that a good 2/3, now I'm just painting with a broad brush stroke here, almost 2/3 of all colleges required some college admissions test. And then about a third test optional. So test optional was already around. And then something that's called test flexible. Flash forward to now, only 10% officially require a test score. What you'll see here, however, is a good, hold on, I'm having a little bit of a challenge here. Let me move this. Okay. What you see is a good over 80%, over 4/5 of schools are test optional. And then you have test free temporarily and test free permanently. Now, I do want to share with you test free. What that means is a school will not look at your test scores at all, even if you got a 1600 or a 36. They will not look at your test scores at all. And that's the whole University of California UC system, also the whole Cal State system, and several other schools are 8% of schools are test free. And remember what I said, though, they may rely more on other types of tests, such as APs. What you want to look at are these test optional statuses. And be careful with this teal pie slice. It's what, 17% of colleges. Notice it's test optional temporary. And what that means is that at any given moment in time, they may decide to change their mind, maybe make it test required, maybe make it test optional permanently, or even go test free. You just never know. I remember in the middle of the testing application, college application season, I remember Purdue had changed its policy, and I had one or two students that are like, "Oh no, I'm applying there." You just need to keep in close contact with your college admissions counselors, and especially regarding the colleges that you're interested in. Now, something I do want to share is the correlation of test score submissions and admission rates. So what you see on the left-hand side here is Northeastern early decision. And this was back in 2021. They truly were test neutral, meaning their admission rate for if you submitted a score was exactly the same rate of admissions if you had not submitted a score, exactly the same. Submit and not submit. Score or no score, exactly the same. However, and this is just an example, again, a sampling of universities of how the test optional data can be different in terms of admission rates with a test score and without. If you look here, Georgia Tech, Emory Early Decision, and Boston College, especially, well, Emory and Boston College, you are 2.7 times more likely to be admitted if you had submitted a test score than if you hadn't. Now, be careful. This is correlation, not causation. Causation would be, oh, two students who have the exact same transcript, exact same, GPA and activities, and one submits a test score, the other doesn't, and let's say the test scores are the same. The person who submitted a test score would get in and the other one wouldn't. That would be causation. Like all things being equal. Oh, just because you submitted a test, you got in. Okay. That is not what we're saying. What we are saying is that, of course, when it comes to test optional schools, students, if you do better, of course, you're going to want to submit a test score. So there is that relationship. And one big reason why I'm mentioning that is that it may very well behoove you to submit your test scores to test optional schools, even if your scores aren't as high as you'd like them to be, because many schools have shown to have an inherent bias in that there's an assumption that if a student didn't submit a test score, they must have done very badly. It's almost like you ask a teacher, if you're a teacher, you ask students a question, and certain people, just a couple people raise their hands. The assumption is that all the people who did not raise their hand don't know the answer. That's not necessarily true. So here's the thing. Brown University came out with some stats showing that a number of students were disadvantaging themselves by not submitting test scores because they thought, oh, it's not high enough. I don't want you to do that. So this is something that you will definitely need to discuss with your college admissions counselor. Now, something else, must wrap this up so you can ask questions. Super scoring, very important. The idea is that super scoring will take the highest score of each section. So this person took the SAT twice, got a 1400 and a 1390. But if you take the highest score of the math, it's 690, the highest score of the verbal, which is 750, this student actually got a 1440. So this shows you that it's actually oftentimes good to take the test more than once, especially when it comes to schools that super score. Also, I wanted to tell you about score choice. By the way, not all schools super score or allow for super scoring, but it is a majority of colleges. Score choice, that is that a student gets to decide which scores to submit to a school. So meaning you can hide the bad ones. Not all schools allow for score choice. You can scan here or look at the college guide that I told you to get more information on that. Finally, self-reporting is a wonderful thing. It allows you to save money. You can self-report your test scores for those schools that allow for it. And this is an example of schools that do. And then to officially submit the test scores, that's when you have to pay for that reporting, that official reporting. That's really when they allow for self-reporting, you just do that once you're accepted, which saves you a lot of money. So I know that's a lot of information, and hopefully I'm here to kind of help calm your fears or kind of assuage them, if you will. So before we move on to questions, please remember this is just one step on your journey of the college admissions and college admission testing process. A link of this recording will be sent to you, as Tamisha said. And our mission at Compass is really to help as many students as possible. So please feel free to email, call, let us know what your questions are, what your concerns are, if you have any confusion, and remember to keep positive on this journey. Take a deep breath. It's just one part of the college admissions journey. I like to end the presentation with this quote from Zig Ziglar, a motivational speaker. He said that if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. But if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. We at Compass are determined to make you unstoppable. So thank you so much for being patient with some of the snafus at the beginning. And I'd now like to open it up to questions. While we do that, I am going to put on the screen, hold on, I hope you, yes, great. I'll put on the screen this list of resources for successful testing that you might find helpful. It talks about some of, talks about some of the things I had mentioned. So I am now going to, let's see, let me look at Q&A. One question was, will we get the slides? I will make sure to have the slides sent to you. One moment. Okay. I'm just making that slides. Great. I will make sure to send Laura and Tamisha the slides. So yes, because it's helpful. I know. Not only the recording will be helpful, but you'll be able to click through it. Yes, I'll make sure they're sent to you. Do students know which session, the 2A or 2B they're in during the test? You are not, a student is not informed. So there's no judgment, there's no mind game or anything like that. You won't know if it is the easy or more challenging module. And oh yes, the QR code for the guide again. Absolutely. Let me go back to this. Hold on, done. Let me close out of this. And I'm going to, one moment. One moment. I'm going to scan through this completely. Boop. And it is right here. That should be it. Perfect. That is the code for the guide. And it's really phenomenal. We do update it every year. Another one, notice this is, for this current school year. The next one, it always comes out sometime in the summer, and we come out, so literally, if you want, you can get two versions. Sometimes there's some late information that comes out anywhere in the summer. So a lot of times we hold on to releasing the next year's guide just because it's like, oh no, these schools are coming out with new information. Let's see. Okay, great. Q&A, another one. Oh, okay. Yes, I hope you can see the QR code. Let me make sure that you can see it. Yes, great. Let me see if there's anything else. Any other questions? I know that, please know that it is a lot to digest. By the way, I took out a slide just for the sake of expediency. How the super scoring will work for the ACT is you would get the highest score from the English, from the math, and from the reading, and then that's the composite score, which is the average of those three. By the way, the science, because it's optional, it's a separate score. It's not put into that core composite score. So it'll be a separate score out of 36. But just so you know how the ACT super scoring would work. Okay, I don't see any open questions right now. I'll give it a few more moments if anyone has any questions. It's been a pleasure to speak with all of you this evening. I actually was going to ask, yeah, I think now is about, I know that there is a final session where alumni will be talking to you. So Tamisha, thank you so much for having me and for having Compass again this evening.
Thank you so much. So as Miss Judy said, we definitely will be having the recordings uploaded soon. You could check the website. And I do appreciate all the wonderful information that she has provided. The QR codes, the slides will also be probably updated as well. Not probably, they will be as well available to you. So thank you and have a good evening.